Good morning. We've got a beautiful day here, which is a nice day to do a little bit of a honey harvesting. We've got something we haven't done for a while, and that's harvest from the classics here. We've gotten a bit homogenised here with our Flow Hive 2s, but this is our original hive, and it's got a beautiful artwork on it here by Sarah, which is so cool. It's one nice thing you can do with the classic is get carried away with painting, because you've got to paint them anyway if you really want to protect that wood and stop it getting that mildew. The cedar hives you can actually even leave raw or oil, and you can keep them looking like that wood colour, but when you've got the Auracaria wood, you actually need to use a good quality house paint on the outside to give it a long lasting protected coat. So I'm just setting up here. If you have a look in the side window, you can see there's some honey, which is fantastic. We're here in our winter, and the bees are bringing in a little bit. Some days you can smell the nectar as they evaporate it and do that amazing job of dewatering the honey, getting the moisture content down nice and low. And but there's still not a lot coming in, so we won't harvest a lot of honey. We'll just harvest a little bit of honey from one of the frames in this hive. I normally probably wouldn't, but we want to do a bit of a show and tell here, because you can have a look at the back and see that there's actually no honey in this window at all. So that's the reason why I'm choosing the side one, because I can see it's capped, and that means the honey should be ready for our jar. So next thing I'm going to do is get this tube here. The tongue goes in the bottom there. That does a nice little job of cleaning out what we call the leak back point. Jar goes underneath, and then we're ready to roll. We take out the key access cover, cap out of the top, and then all we need to do is put this key in and give it a turn. So I'm just going to go part way in, makes it a bit easier. Give that a little turn like that, and I'll go in a little bit further, go again, and once more, and that will start to harvest that frame that we're looking at. Now, one thing I forgot to do with the classic, because I haven't harvested from the classic for a while, is actually pull out this core flute slider. It's important. I'll just give a little wipe off there, or you could switch sides and put it in the top slot. That's, if you do get any honey spills, they'll just sit on that slider and the bees can lick them up through the screen. They're very good at cleaning up any honey that's not in a cell inside the hive. So that's an important thing to remember if you're harvesting from the Flow Hive Classic. You can see the honey just starting to come out now, which is beautiful. It has been a cold night here, so I've been moving a bit slower than you usually see us harvesting, and typically the edge frames get a bit cooler than the ones in the middle, but that's starting to flow nicely anyway. If there's any questions, put them in the comments and we'll get to answering those, and we'll just marvel at this beautiful thing. I never get sick of watching the honey just pour out of the hive. Look at that. It's a beautiful thing. Detecting a few globules in there, which might be some of the medicinal honeys. We've got the Australian Manuka here locally, and it has a jelly-like thixotropic tendency, so you'll see little blobbles coming out if you've got that in your honey. Highly medicinal. They use it for wound care. They can often heal wounds with it that the conventional medications can't. So it's getting quite a good name for itself. It's nice to have a little bit of it in the honey, especially this time of year when there's colds and flus and things around, to be having a little bit of medicinal honey. Any questions?
Yes, Cedar. Nice to see the classic being harvested today, which is fantastic, as you were saying. But just checking on the slope on the on the classic cedar, because the Flow Hive 2 have levels and things. How does the slope work on the classic?
Okay, well what we did with the Classic is we made it so you level the surface that you put the hive on and the slope is built in for you into the base. And we found that worked fine until the ground shifts, which often happens in wet weather, and especially when you've got a heavy beehive and maybe a couple of bricks, and you'll think you've put it on the perfect slope, but actually it's shifted over time. So it would be a good idea to actually check that the base of this was level before harvesting to make sure we do indeed have a backward slope. Another thing you can do is get an app on your phone, a level app, put your phone on top and just check it's got approximately a 3 degrees slope backwards. It looks like it does have a slope backwards, so that's good, and that means the honey will flow out towards the rear rather than the other way into the hive.
Fantastic. Cedar, Joanne's asking, how many bees do you need to fill a hive?
So it's amazing, isn't it? If you looked at a hive, you'd probably guess in the hundreds, right? But it's actually up to 50,000 in a hive like this. There's a little interested bee. Hey, hey. You don't want you getting in the honey. So they are a bit hungry at the moment, so no surprises. There's a bee sniffing around going, that's easier than going to find flowers that aren't there. But you don't want to allow bees to eat honey outside the hive, or you start getting this issue where bees will start robbing the honey from other hives and then spreading pathogens around, decimating weak colonies and all sorts of things. So if you do see them being naughty like that, then you can cover your jar with a bit of kitchen wrap, cling wrap, a veil, anything like that. Okay.
Fantastic. Cedar, Gary's saying he keeps hearing about the honey flow and is a new beekeeper. Just wondering what they're looking for to identify a honey or a nectar flow.
So a honey flow is simply a term that beekeepers use to say when the flowers are producing a lot of nectar and the bees are going and getting that nectar and bringing it back to your hive. They say they're on a honey flow. Oh, there we go.
I think we've frozen.
Well, that sorted out those two bees.
I think we've frozen.
Okay. Frozen. That's a shame. Yeah, I did forget the extra bit to the internet setup. Is it coming back?
No, it hasn't. How's yours look, Callum? YouTube's not working at all.
I can. Mine says we're live. But I can't click off this,
Yeah.
otherwise it closes.
Yeah.
Okay,
see, look.
1, 2, 1, 2. Are we live?
Oh, here we go. Maybe now.
Are we back again? See how we go. All right, internet problemo. I'm just going to put you back at the entrance.
Maybe
Are we back on yet? Sorry about this, everybody, if you can hear me. We're getting internet troubles of late.
Oh.
We're back on?
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
Thanks for your patience there. Hopefully the internet connection will hold up for the rest of this live stream. Any questions, Trace?
Yeah, great. And thanks, everyone's letting us know that they can hear us now. Chris is asking, what does it mean when the bees are covering the entrance in the evenings during the summer months of the hive?
It means you've got a very healthy hive and they're hot and they're vacating out of the hive to allow some space for the bees to get adequate airflow in the hive to cool it down and get it to the right temperature. So that's typically what's happening. You can also get a situation where you've got just overcrowding in general, and you can tell the difference between the two. If you see a lot of bees at the front, but you open the side window and there is like ridiculous amounts of bees in here as well where you can't even see the comb, then that is a sign that you've just got a lot of bees in your hive and it's time to take a split or add another box to give your bees some more room. Look, that's the frame we're harvesting. You can see that honey has changed colour from the beginning, where it's now light because the honey's drained out from beneath their feet and it's still draining out, and the bees are just walking on top of their capping. It's very cool. Lucky for us, they're clever enough to notice when the honey's disappeared. They uncap it, they fix up all of the the cells and the whole process starts again.
Cedar, with the classic hive that we recommend painting, what sort of paint has been used on this hive?
So it's great to use good quality outdoor house paint, and that'll just mean it's built for the outdoors and it'll last longer.
Fantastic, and with that beautiful artwork that's on it as well.
It is a great thing to get carried away with your family, doing some nice artwork on your hive. We've got quite a few painted hives in the apiary actually. It's a nice one down there with a whole picture showing the life cycle of a bee. Good.
Oh, it's such a gorgeous colour, isn't it?
It is. It's nice tasting honey too. Yum yum. Thank you, bees.
Cedar, Chris is asking, Chris lives in Brisbane and the hives seem to have a lot of condensation in the super. Just wondering, would this be normal with the amount of rain we've had and coming into winter, and will this affect the hive at all?
Okay, so condensation is caused when you've got humid air, and bees' hives are humid inside, coming into contact with a cool surface. So it's quite normal to have condensation on the inside of a beehive, and the bees will actually use that condensation as a water source. Now, one thing that happens with the flow hive is you can see it because we've got windows, and if you take the window off, sometimes you see the condensation come as the clear acrylic gets cooler by the air, and you get the condensation collecting on that surface. So it's nothing really to worry about unless you're just getting ridiculous amounts and it's raining from the roof and your bees are getting all wet. But you're unlikely to get that here in Australia.
Great. Claire's tuning in and just wondering which is the best way to feed the bees under the roof. They've got a small struggling hive and have added a Ziploc bag with some teeny holes up on the crown board under the roof. Any thoughts on this approach? There is a lot still in flower, but this hive have not stored any supplies on the frame, so it's worrying them.
Okay.
So the Ziploc bag method under the roof.
Yes, well done. That's a method people use, so great. We've got a video that's called How to Make a Quick and Dirty Feeder, and it's got just all sorts of ways you can knock up a feeder under the roof. You can use a jar upside down with some holes in it. That'll actually feed them a bit quicker than the Ziploc bag method, because as the day warms up and cools, it'll actually pulse a little bit and push some of the syrup out of the holes, and the bees will then clean them up and really get the idea. So if you're finding that the bees aren't actually taking the nectar or sugar syrup from the Ziploc bag, then grab a jar like that, get the lid, take it off, put it on a wooden surface, get a nail and punch a bunch of holes in here just by hammering it down. So you've got a couple of dozen holes in there. You've got your sugar syrup in there. You turn it upside down and what will happen, it will rain out a bit of nectar at first, but then it'll stop because of the airlock. And that goes over the top of the hole. So you turn it right over the top of the hole in the inner cover there and rest it on it. And that will actually feed the bees like that. Now, if you don't want to be filling that jar every day, you could go for a bigger 2-litre jar. But if you're going to do that, it won't fit under the roof. So you'll need to add another empty box on top of your inner cover, and then the roof on top of that, and that'll give you a lot of space for a big jar feeder. A few tips there. Here we don't generally need to feed them because they're quite good at finding some nectar here in the winter down on the heathland. There's always dribs and drabs coming in, and we actually get good honey flows in the winter. So it does depend whereabouts you are. Ask some local beekeepers as well whether you need to feed your bees and so on.
Great. See to Raphael tuning in from Chile. How awesome is that? Just wondering, how do you get propolis and wax out of the hive?
Chile.
Yeah.
Excellent. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. So one is you can take the plug out of the inner cover under this roof and allow them to build some freeform honeycomb up here, and then you can harvest that. You can enjoy eating the honeycomb or crush and strain that honeycomb, and then you've got some wax you can use. You can also add a whole another box just for honeycomb collection. Some people add a medium-sized box with little frames. In fact, Trace last week, who's reading out the questions here, she's been doing that at home and bringing her honeycomb into work, which was lovely last week, Trace.
Yeah, it was good.
So you can mix it up. You can add extra boxes for honeycomb collection, or you can take a frame from the side of the brood nest here, which is usually honey as well. Don't take it if it's got brood on it. If you're using naturally drawn comb, it's quite easy. If you go back about 4 or 5 Facebook Lives, you'll watch us cutting a heart out of honeycomb in my son's beehive, and the bees will fill that back in really quickly. So feel free to harvest some honeycomb from the edge frames as well. When it comes to propolis, the way people usually harvest propolis is with a propolis mat. So you can do that on any beehive, including the Flow Hive, where you're basically putting in a mesh, and the bees, they don't really like to have a mesh there that they can't get through to. So what they'll do is they'll block it off, and they'll block all of that mesh off with their propolis typically. Then you take that mat out and you melt the propolis off. So that's a way you can harvest propolis from a beehive too. It's used in medicines. It's said to be really good for antibacterial, for colds and flus and things like that.
Right. Cedar, Kurt's saying, are you aware that some hives are banned in certain countries, for example Trinidad and Tobago?
No, if you've got more information on that,
Yeah.
please fill us in.
Estelle's tuning in from Atlanta, and just noticed, of course, that the hives are on a bit of a slope, but just wondering what sort of structure they're sitting it on, and did you try to make it level?
Yes, so this is the Flow Hive Classic, and the slope is built into the baseboard, but you do need to put it on a level surface. So here we have I think the base is actually the blocks underneath, which are a lightweight concrete block. They are actually sloping back a little bit already by the look of it. So that's increased the slope here. The slope built into the base is close to 3 degrees. It looks, by my eye, to be 4 or perhaps close to 5 degrees slope backwards. So you need to be at least 3, somewhere in that range, 3 to 5, and that'll give you the honey flowing back and out into your jar rather than spilling into the hive.
Great. Cedar, and on that, and it's a question that comes up a bit through customer support, is people who have just traditional or standard hives, when they're often wanting to add a Flow Hive Super to it, do they need to put that slope onto their hives, on their standard hives, to be able to extract the honey?
Yes, you do. So some people will do it just as they harvest, just by lifting the front of the hive and putting something about 1 inch thick under the front. To me, that's tedious and a bit annoying. You're going to have this beautiful experience of harvesting with your family, and you've got to lift the front and annoy the bees and all of this. So I prefer to have the slope built in permanently and deal with the water issues. So the way we did that with the Flow Hives is we sloped the entrance board, we sloped the screen bottom board, so we get less water coming in. But because we're using screen bottom boards, it doesn't matter a whole lot because it goes through the screen bottom board anyway. But if you're using a solid bottom board on a conventional beehive, then you'll have to slope it towards the entrance. So that gives you 2 choices. You slope it when it's time to harvest, backwards, or you put your honey super on the other way around and harvest right where the bees are. Not recommended. So, because you'll end up with just bees all in your honey, right? So the slope, but yeah, if you've got a solid bottom board, you really don't want to slope it backwards because you'll collect a whole lot of rain in there. Unless you drill a bunch of holes in it to let the water out, you'll end up with a puddle of water in the bottom of your hive that the bees are getting stuck in. So your only choice then is to lift the front when it's time to harvest.
Good thinking. Eric's said did an inspection today and couldn't find a queen, did see eggs and larvae in various stages of growth and saw a possible queen cup with a larvae in it, seemed small, and just wondering what's going on there.
Okay, that's interesting. So if you don't find the queen, it may be that you just didn't find her, but well done for getting right into your beekeeping. Now, if you have a look and you notice that there's no young larvae, so there's no eggs, no young larvae, there's grubs down the cells, and you can't find the queen, then you probably don't have a queen. So if that's the case, then your bees have done the right thing and they're starting to raise another queen that you've seen in the queen cup, which is a great thing. So queens can perish for a bunch of reasons, but one is the hive can actually decide they're not doing a good enough job and they'll actually bump them off and raise a new one. So that could be what's happening in your hive.
Fantastic. James is asking, I need to know which model, do I need to know which, this is a good question actually, because we get this, and Bija, who's here today, who's just started a customer support, it's the endless question of what size brood box goes with which size box. And James is asking, so if I've ordered, I've got a 10 frame box, what size brood box do I need to buy? And does it have to be, if I've got a Flow Hive 2, do I have to buy a Flow Hive 2 brood box? And then what size brood box do I actually have to get? And it's a really common question that we can mix them up. So if we haven't got the Cedar brood boxes for sale, they can perhaps buy another brood box from another model. Would you agree?
Okay, so there's a little bit.
That was a big question, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a big question. I'll start with the numbers of the two sizes in beekeeping. So this is based on a Langstroth hive. So what you've got here is a 8-frame Langstroth brood box with 8 brood frames in it. Some of the other hives down in the other garden are the next size up that have the 10-frame brood box with 10 brood frames in it. Now we've gone and confused the matter by making flow frames that are wider, because when bees are storing honey, they actually prefer deeper cells. Now I did a lot of measuring cells in wild honeycomb and came up with this size as being a good size for bees. But it was a little bit of a juggle, a bit of adjustment, a bit of maths to work out that 6 flow frames, like you see here, go with an 8-frame brood box. 7 flow frames go with a 10-frame brood box. So that makes it confusing, but that's the sizing that we needed to do. Now, on your question of can you mix them up, you need to use the right size brood box to match. So if you're using all 8-frame gear, then you'll use the Flow Hive 6 brood box. I'm confusing myself now. And if you're using the 10-frame, you'll need to use a Flow Hive 7 brood box. So it's a little bit confusing, but do reach out to us. Trace will be on the phone or writing back to you, or one of our experienced beekeepers, and helping you get the right equipment. Then there was another part to your question, can you mix it up between the models?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, to a certain extent. We do have a bit of a legacy issue here, where we started with a big bang in crowdfunding. It was absolutely ridiculous, 25,000 orders. We hadn't even made a hive yet, and we had to get them done before Christmas. And so we started manufacturing in multiple countries at once, and because we wanted to support local industry and so on. And what that meant was we had variations going on. This is the Flow Hive Classic, the original we started with, and we're still making it today because people still love it. And we're, when it came to doing our Flow Hive 2, we matched the size here that we were making the Classics in Australia at the time. So we now have a discrepancy between sizes. Only a few millimeters, but enough to be annoying. So if you have this box here on top of this box, you need to center it, and there'll be an overlap of a couple of millimeters on the edges, and the other way around. But what it does mean is this roof will be a bit too tight to fit on this hive, but the other way around it's okay. Anyway, we'll get there with that by adjusting at some point so they're a bit easier to swap around. That's on the wish list for adjustments, is to make this roof a little bit bigger so you can just mix all the equipment and it doesn't matter.
Fantastic, Seed. So you can see why we get a little bit confused, and we're all confused, but just call us if you're really confused and we'll help unconfuse you.
That's right.
So just the hive that you're harvesting from at the moment, how many, so it's a 6-frame. It's a 6-frame hive, isn't it, that you're harvesting from now? Yes.
This is the 6-frame hive. You can count 6 here, 6-frame flow hive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Fantastic. Now I'm having a little bit of problem with my Facebook Live. I don't think it's everyone else, I think it's me. So just bear with me for a minute. But maybe you can just talk about, I'll mention, Cedar, the sale that we've got on, that we're launching. It's the Auracaria sale, and everyone pronounces it differently, or otherwise known as Australian hoop pine. And it's going to start tomorrow on all our websites. And the offer is a free e-voucher with any full-priced Auracaria Flow Hive Super or bundle until the end of June. And these vouchers will be sent out the first week in July. So that's a pretty great deal. So there's a $50 US and AU voucher and Canada. And then the EU, it's €40, and the UK, it's 40 pounds as well. So look out for that one, and if you're looking to buy, you can score yourself an extra e-voucher to purchase things. There are terms and conditions, but they'll all be on our website as well. So I hope that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Lovely. So if you're thinking about getting started, could be a good time to take advantage of a little extra there.
But totally. I think I'm almost back. Oh, here we go. I think it's me that's having all these problems. Okay, here we go. So Matthews is asking, is it legal to harvest honey in the open in New South Wales?
Okay, it's not legal to leave honey out for the bees. So as long as you're not leaving honey out for the bees, then that's okay. And the reason why you don't want to leave honey out for the bees is the bees can come and start foraging on the honey. So if you see that happening, then cover it up so the bees can't. If you leave honey exposed and the bees are coming to rob it, and lots of bees are coming, and bees from all sorts of different hives, then you could be spreading disease such as AFB or EFB if your hive happens to have that, to other hives. And that's the reason why you don't leave honey out for bees. You know, some people, look, there's an naughty bee there, so we should cover up the jar. But we're just about to finish harvesting this frame anyway. But typically when the bees are really hungry, they'll do that. The rest of the time, they don't bother you.
Nice. See, the Chuck's in St. Louis in the US, and the bees have been filling the flow frames with nectar, but are a little slow in capping. Is all the rain we've been having, do you think, a factor for that?
Yes. So what you'll find is sometimes you'll get a honey flow and it'll go and go and go great, and then all of a sudden it'll stop and the bees are like, oh come on, I was almost finished the cells to put the capping on. And at that stage sometimes you'll find they'll give up and they'll actually cap the cells indented, and they'll cap it right in like that because they really want to preserve some honey for later in case they need it. And but if the flow keeps going, they'll build way out from the flow frames an extra bit. So that's why you get fluctuations on the amount of honey in a flow frame, is depending on how much they've added to the cells, if you like, to store more honey, or sometimes you even might not have the frame completely full.
Great. Phil's asking, he's just noticed there's a bit of a large gap around the harvesting window, and the bees don't like to put honey in the frames closest to the window. Just wondering, is this because of the light that's coming in?
Okay, so the harvesting window's back here. We've got a spider that's come and joined us.
Oh.
Right under the honey tube here. Have a look at that. It's a baby huntsman spider. And It's a cool looking spider. They get huge. Trace loves them because she's from New Zealand, but they love spiders.
Yeah, right.
They get as big as your hand, and they look really spooky, but they're actually quite friendly.
Actually, that's a good point, Cedar, because a customer rang the other day and a huntsman spider had gone inside her hive and she was really worried, would it affect the bees or would the bees kill the spider?
Well, bees are really good at keeping things out of their hive, so I don't think they would let a spider just run around in there. I think they would sort that spider out real quick. Sometimes you'll notice it when you take the roof off your hive and there's a bunch of big ants on there or something and they fall in, the bees just instantly are activated for a big tussle with the ants. So I haven't really seen spiders living in the hive. Your colonies, hey, as we were saying, out of there. Well, so if you do get a bee that's fallen in the jar like that, it's no big deal. Just get your key and you can fish it out like this. Alright, so you've got it on the end and you can just put it back at the entrance. The other bees will clean that up real quick.
Nice.
Okay, so back to your question about the gap.
The gap, mind the gap. Oh, there's the spider, it's just come out, look at it.
It's taken off, here it is. There we go. Okay, so they were talking about this gap. So the classic here.
I think so, yeah.
I can't put this closed because of our spider, but also because of the honey harvesting. But they were talking about the gap here, right?
Yeah. And
so if this is closed and you're seeing a bit of a gap around the window now, the Auracaria wood does swell and shrink a lot more than the cedar, so we do have to allow a bit of tolerance there. I haven't found that to be an issue in terms of letting too much light in. But if you leave the cover off altogether, you will find they'll remove the honey from this last section of cells. They like to pull it back in if you leave the cover off. Now, you could test it out if you like by filling in the gap. You'll probably find it's either the honey flow. Once you get a big honey flow, that'll change and they'll bring it out to the extremities. Like you can see here, they've pulled the honey back from the edge of the hive. There's no honey here, but we're harvesting honey because there's still a full frame on the edge here. So when you get a big nectar flow, they'll utilise that space and fill it in. But you can, however, get some hives due to genetics, right, that will just not like filling the edges. And we've had that where we've had a whole row of 20 hives and one will never fill the edge, which makes it a bit harder to work out when to harvest. It's really useful when they're using that how we intended, but bees will be bees and do all sorts of things, right? But they will, if they're not filling the end, but you can see it in the side window, nice and full, then maybe you'll need to pull your frames and just have a bit of a look and try and gauge what's what in your hive and when it's ready to harvest. You can also look down in between the frames and see if you can see the capping further in by looking right down here. A little bit tricky, but you can actually sometimes see the capping a little bit further in.
Said it's funny because I mentioned to you that happened to my hive and I thought it didn't look full, and so I opened it up and sure enough it was all capped, and so I did another harvest on it and I got about 6 jars, so it was full. But my bees are doing exactly that, they're not coming right to the end.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know,
okay.
they're a bit
Also,
shy or something.
Also a bit seasonal. I think none of these hives are actually bringing it to the end at the moment because there's just not enough honey around.
Totally. Cedar, Robin's saying she's got a question about the harvesting brackets, and one is, Rhonda, you're asking that they're not available, but just ring customer support because it depends whereabouts you are when they will be back available. But the other part of the question is, are they the same brackets, Cedar, that you use when you pull out your brood frames on the side?
They are. So they're nice dual purpose there. Look at that. The bees will get straight in and sort her out. Yeah, they are. So they're nice dual purpose. Use them for a frame rest when you're inspecting the brood and for harvesting as well. Here, I couldn't find the shelf brackets for this hive in a hurry, so I just grabbed them off another hive, and that's why there's a mismatch between the colouring here. And the classics actually have a different shelf bracket because they have a different finger pattern to the Flow Hive 2.
Yeah, so make sure you order the correct brackets for which hive you've got. And if you don't know, just give us a call or send us a message.
They're a handy little widget though.
Oh,
for doing both those things.
they're so good. I wish I had a camera on our camera person today, Callum. He is doing all sorts of angles. I think sometimes I need a camera to film the camera person. He's almost sliding down the bank with his camera at the moment.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Nice work.
Cedar, Matthew's asking, should we always go into the field and inspect before harvesting?
No. So we intended this invention so you didn't have to do that. And if you pay attention to what's going on in your hive, you will after a while get a really good idea of when it's time to harvest and when it's not. Using the side windows, using the end window, watching the honey flows come and go. The only time it gets tricky is when there's actually not that much honey, and you can just leave it for the bees at that time. Or if you're really not sure, then as you say, you can get in there and have a look by pulling some frames. By all means do for learning purposes, but the intention isn't to pull your frames every time before you harvest. The idea is you can see when it's capped, you can see when it's ready, and you can harvest in a nice, easy, gentle way.
Nice. Cedar, will you do many brood inspections through the winter time, or do you leave them in the winter time?
We do brood inspections in the winter time, but I think it's fair to say we don't really get a winter as far as the bees are concerned. Being a European honeybee, they're used to deep snow. We don't get that here, so this is our winter, and I'm actually sweating in the sun. And the bees are busy foraging. So for us, we will inspect all winter if we need to, or there's a reason to. But in other parts, in the southern parts of Australia, they do get a long cold winter, and as you say, they will stop inspecting in the winter and usually start as soon as those warm days, the first sort of sunny days of spring or the last little bit of winter. They'll start to get in there and have a look and see how their hive did, see whether it survived the winter, and then they might give it a bit of a helping hand if it needs it. Otherwise, they will then let it go and build up as the spring blossoms come.
Nice. Just a quick, Phil's just wanting a quick mention of our email address, and Phil, it's info@honeyflow.com. So you're harvesting now up here, and as you were saying, we don't have much of a winter. Will you leave honey in the super for the bees over winter?
Well, we don't need to, right? Because they get good honey flows in the winter. But if you live in a place where you've got a long cold winter where there's not much flowering, then yes, you will need to leave honey for your bees. That's what they're storing it for those times. And ask around, ask your locals how much honey you need to leave in your hive, in your area, for your bees to survive. And ask a few people, because the answers will differ wildly. But the idea is they've got enough honey to survive, and if they don't have enough honey leading up to the winter, then people typically feed them some sugar syrup so they can at least store something. Even though sugar's not the perfect thing for bees, you're better off feeding them than letting them starve to death.
Yes, fantastic. So in the wild, Cedar, if the bees weren't in a hive, would they just starve to death?
Yes, that's right. So if they if they didn't get any stores together in the spring and summertime in those really cold wintry places with deep snow, then they might not make it to the other side. So they do pretty amazing things. Bees will actually change a bit for the winter. Like these forager bees might only last 4 or 6 weeks. Very short life for these bees. But what they'll do is they will breed what's called fat bees. They'll raise fat bees which have a bigger fat body, and they can last 6 months. So that way your bees, you end up at springtime with still a bunch of bees to do the jobs in the hive as the queen starts laying again, and away they go.
And off they go again. Cedar is still saying she had some honey left in the flow frames at the end of the season and wanted to leave it for the bees to clean out, but there were small hive beetles present, so had to in the end remove the super. Just wondering what to do to store the frames, and does she need to clean out the honey before she stores them?
So if you live in a warm area, then you'll need to either put them in a deep freeze, which is the ideal thing because they just stay as they are, and when they're ready to go back on one day, they won't be any issues. If you've got a situation where you can't actually find a freezer to put them in, then the next best thing is actually to harvest that honey, put those frames back on the hive and let them lick up the last bits so the cells are dry when you put them away. If you leave honey on your frames in a warmer climate, what you'll find is fermentation will occur and mould will occur, and they'll be pretty manky by the time you go to put them back on again. So a couple of options there for you. But if you live in a really cold place, then you can probably just put them in a tub and leave them in the garage, and you'll find that that'll be just about as good as a freezer.
Great. And Cedar, is mould bad for the hive or for your honey?
Look, bees are used to dealing with mould in a hive, so they will work on those cells, they'll recoat them in wax and they'll get them going again. It does tend to stay there as a bit of a stain, as a look, but the bees will get in there and make them their own again and reuse it. So if you do have frames that aren't looking very good anymore and they need a bit of a clean, then the only thing we've really found that does a good job of cleaning them is a hot water pressure sprayer. And you can either buy an expensive hot water pressure sprayer, or you can get a cheap one and feed it with hot water, but that hot water is going to need to be about 70 degrees in order to, that's 70 degrees Celsius, to melt the wax off the frames, and that seems to clean them back to looking closer to original.
Nice. Cedar, can you add a base to the classic hive?
You can. So Trace has those answers for you. People ring up all the time wanting to do that. She can put together a kit for you to add to your classic hive, and that way it's got a stand like this with the pest management tray, the ant guards and the wingdings.
All the wingdings. Cedar, if new beekeeper, what things to look out for when positioning the hive, or where to put it if you're just in a suburban backyard?
Okay, great question. So if you are planning to put your hive for the first time, then there's a few things you'll need to consider. The main one is the flight path. You see the bees are coming and going here, and they're going out this way. But if you had a pathway right here, then people are more likely to get bees stuck in their hair and the accidental sting, or perhaps if your hive's a little bit more territorial about their entrance, then people are more likely to get stings if you've got a pathway right in front. So you want to leave probably 5 meters or so in front for them to, without a pathway there. So position your hive so the bees can just get up and away here without bothering anybody. That's probably the main one. Next one is sun or shade. So if you've only got a choice between full sun or full shade, I'd go full sun. It helps keep away pathogens like chalk brood in your hive. If you've got the option for full sun in winter and nice shady afternoons in the summer, that's even better. So you can position your hive near a tree where the shadow of the tree comes on in the afternoon in summer. That'd be a really nice thing to do for your hive, but as said, bees will be fine in full sun. They'll also be fine in full shade usually, but full sun is better than full shade. And other things you might like to consider is pets. Some pets are fine, but some dogs might keep hassling the entrance and getting stings on the nose. So some people put a little fence around their hive if they've got dogs in their yard. What else have we got?
What about lights?
So lights. So I've got a hive very close to my front door, and I've got a porch light, and that's fine. You rarely get bees buzzing it, and that's because I've positioned the hive so from the entrance where the bees are all hanging out, sometimes at night time, they're in the shadow of the hive. They can't see the light. Whereas if it was spinning around the other way, you'd find that the bees, if they can see that light, they'll come and hassle it at night, and you'll get a lot more bees kind of buzzing around your porch light. So that's one other minor point to think about. The other one is how close to your house or where you live you want to be. Now, I like them really close because I love bees, and I also can, if I've got an aggressive hive, I'm able to move it further away or requeen it so it's gentle again. But if you are putting them really close to your house, then it's a nice idea to order bees from a bee breeder and ask for a nice gentle colony like this one, where I can stand here and the bees are being friendly. Not all hives are like that. Some bees are a lot more territorial around their entrance. So if you are putting them close, get some nice gentle bees.
No. And the other thing, maybe your neighbours, Cedar, if you're in town as well.
Yeah, so neighbours, not a bad idea to visit your neighbours. Always bring a jar of honey and keep them sweet. Just let them know you've got a hive if it's very close to their house. And it's a good idea because occasionally you get somebody who's got the anaphylaxis like people do to peanuts and so on, and that might also change where you position your hive. Now what I'm going to do now is just close off the harvesting, so finish this harvesting process. So I'm going to put the key in the top slot. There's 2 slots at the top. I'm just going to push it all the way to the back, and then I'm going to turn the handle to a 90. It's quite easy to turn in one movement for the closure. Tip here, leave it like that for 30 seconds or a minute, just to make sure all of those parts are seating back down properly into their fully cell-formed position, and that will save some problems downstream. The little cap goes in here, and I'm just going to pull this out and swap it for the cap. Now there's a little leak back point there. Any remaining honey will go back into the hive. And if you watch carefully, I'll just spin this around, you might even see the bee's tongue starting to lick up in that position there. I'll move this honey jar out of the way so you can get in. Let me know if you can see a bee's tongue licking honey. A little bit hard to see.
Sort of, you just about can.
Okay. So, excellent. Thank you very much for all your questions today. We've got time for one more.
Yeah, Cedar, well, a quick one from Rhonda wanting to know, can you mow your grass around your hive?
That's an interesting one. Some bees will get annoyed with mowers. Now, I've got 40 hives at home, and I drive past on a ride-on mower, and there'll be 3 hives out of 40 that just really don't like it, and the rest don't care. So it really depends on your hive. So if you are mowing around your hive, get in your bee suit, wear your gloves, just get used to how your hive behaves with how you're mowing around it. And if possible, try and position yourself, so you position your hive so you don't have to mow in the entrance. That would be ideal because that's where they're getting territorial. If you don't have to mow right there, they're less likely to get upset about it. So, thank you very much for tuning in. And Trace, what was the special?
Oh, the special is, so it's on the Auracaria hive, which is the hive Cedar's harvested from today. You'll get a $50 e-voucher. I think it starts tomorrow. It'll be on all the websites that we have. And if you don't know what they are, just get in touch with us. And basically you get a $50 voucher, and it'll be sent to you in the first week of July. I think the sale goes till the end of June. So it's 50 Australian dollars, 50 US and Canada dollars, and then the 40 euro and the 40 pound, if I remember rightly. And then you can use it to buy extra things, other products. There are always terms and conditions with those vouchers, so just make sure you read those, but you can use them on the Auracaria hives, the supers and the bundles. So a good deal.
Thank you. let us know what you'd like to us to cover. We're here to answer questions and be here for you as you get started in beekeeping. Thank you very much for tuning in. Same time next week.